Everyone. Pam here from Pam's Crafty Corner. Welcome back to my channel for another episode of Coffee, Crime, and Crafts. These are bi-weekly episodes where I discuss the details of a specific crime while working on a weekly craft project. So, today we are going to be reviewing an older case, and I mean much older. We're going to be looking at the case that just resurfaced in the news a few weeks ago because of a new development. It's the case of Kristin Smart, who disappeared in 1996. So what's that, like 25 years ago, I think. So today I have a cold brew iced coffee, and I have my project here all set and ready to go. So let's get to it. Today I'm working on one of my larger cross-stitch pieces. Anyone who's been following me for a while, this piece is not going to be new. It's called Folk Witch. It's a kit produced by Gecko Rouge. And I am stitching this monogamously for Stitch Mania or Monogamania, however you want to phrase it. I've decided that I'm going to work on this piece for the entire month of May because I'm so close to a finish. I'm actually 97.69% complete on this piece. I have stitched 157,925 stitches so far on this piece. So I'm getting down to, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So today I'm going to be concentrating on some larger blocks of color that need to be filled in for her shoes. That way I can follow the pattern fairly easily while I'm going through my notes of this case. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I also said that this case was going to be a pretty epic episode. There's a lot of information because the case is so old. Okay, that's dependent. Sometimes cases are old and you can't find much on them online. However, this case has kind of remained active this entire time, and I was able to find lots of news articles, lots of blogs written about it. I came across a podcast that was done, as well as it was lots of documentation, let's put it that way. So there was a lot for me to go through. I have 10 pages of typewritten notes. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to record this, and then I'm probably going to split it into 2 parts because it'll make it easier to upload to YouTube. So grab your drink and your snack of choice, grab your craft of choice, and let's settle in. It's going to be a long episode, and there's a lot of information to unpack. All right, let me get my thread started here so that I can start getting these stitches filled in. I have my camera mounted above me in a different location, so I hope that I am staying in frame. I will probably stop it at some point just to take a quick little look and make sure. Let me get this started. I usually start with a pin stitch in case you're wondering what I'm doing there. And this is on 25 count fabric, so it's pretty small. Okay. I'll probably try stitching this way. My left hand on top for a little bit. All right, so Kristin Smart. Kristin was born February 20th of 1977 to parents to parents Stan and Denise Smart. She was born in Bavaria, West Germany, when her parents were both teaching children of American military personnel that were stationed there. They moved back to the US a couple of years later and settled in Stockton, California. Kristin has one brother and one sister, and she was very outgoing as a teenager. She was involved in a lot of sports. She worked as a lifeguard, as well as a camp counselor. And, you know, she was pretty typical outgoing teenager. In high school, she developed an interest in architect and design. So when she graduated high school, she went on to California Polytechnic State University, also known as Cal Poly, which I'll refer to it that way for the remainder of these episodes. And Cal Poly was located in San Luis Obispo, California. And I hope I am not butchering that too badly with my accent. By the time of her disappearance, Kristin was a 19-year-old freshman. And she called home typically every Sunday, you know, to check in with her parents. And on Friday, May the 24th, she made an unplanned call. So she called home and didn't get an answer. So she left a message just saying that she had some good news and she would call again on Sunday as, you know, as planned, as normal. So this was on Memorial Day weekend. So the Friday of that weekend, she called home, spoke to nobody, left a message, and went on to carry out her usual weekend activities. So because it was Memorial Day weekend, you know, it was starting out with the promise of being a great weekend on campus. Several students were out of town for the long weekend. But Kristin was one of the students that was actually staying on campus for the weekend. She was looking forward to hanging out and maybe going to a couple of parties. So Kristin's roommate, she was staying at one of the dorms on campus. And her roommate, Crystal, was going out of town for the night on the Friday. So Kristin got together with another girl from her dorm, from her residence there, and they headed out looking for a party to go to. They met up with another student, and he had a pickup truck. So he drove them around for a while. They stopped at a party, but it was very quiet, so they didn't stay, and they left. They continued to drive around for a while, looking for another place to go, when Kristin remembered that someone was supposed to be throwing a birthday party at one of the fraternity houses that was not on campus. So she suggested that they go to this party to check that out instead. So by the time they drove over there, the two friends that she was with, they didn't really feel like going to a party at this frat house. But Kristin was pretty adamant about going. She didn't have any worries about going to the party on her own, because she knew that there would be other people there that she knew. So the two friends she was with just dropped her off at the end of the street. They continued back to campus, and she went on to this frat house for the party. So she did arrive there. When she did get there, several people reported around that time. There was probably just a dozen or so students or kids that the party had started out with. But by the time the party was winding down, there was probably more like 30 to 40 people at this party. So around 2 a.m. in the morning, so this is going to be late Friday night, wee hours of Saturday morning, the 25th, Cheryl Anderson and Tim Davies got ready to leave the party to walk back to campus. When they left, Cheryl saw Kristin passed out on the front lawn of the house next door. Now, she didn't know Kristin well, but she recognized her, and she knew that she lived at Muir Hall on campus. So, you know, they weren't going to leave her there. So they decided they would get her up and figured that they would walk her back to the dorms and make sure she got back to campus on their way. So they were struggling to hold Kristin up because she was so intoxicated. And they were having a bit of difficulty walking with her. It was at this point that another student by the name of Paul Flores, who was also leaving the party, he saw the group and decided that he would go over and join them. He grabbed Kristin around the waist, holding her up, as the four of them continued walking back to campus. Now, I just need to check my placement here. I think I've got all those stitches done. Okay. So he continued to walk with them back to campus. So the walk from this frat house to the dorms was fairly short. It would typically only be about an 11-minute walk. It's not very long at all. Tim had parked his vehicle on campus. So once they reached that area, he broke off from the group as they were nearing the residences. So he left to go get his vehicle and head home. Cheryl, her residence was the next building along. So once they got close enough, Cheryl was sort of on two minds whether she should leave Paul with Kristin, But she confirmed with him that he would see her back to her residence. And once he said yes, he would definitely get her the rest of the way home. Her residence was the next building. His was right next door to hers. Cheryl seemed confident that everything was going to be okay. So she broke away from the group and went on to her dorm. So that now just leaves Paul and Kristin together. To anyone's knowledge, that was actually, seems to be the actual last time Kristin was seen. Although Paul is adamant that he did drop her off to the entrance of her building, which was only about 40 yards away. And once she went up the steps to go inside, he didn't see her again. So that would have been Saturday morning, early Saturday morning. So later in the day on Saturday, Kristin's roommate returned from her night away. And she found that their shared dorm room was empty. It didn't appear that Kristin had stayed in their room on Friday night. Now, Crystal didn't think much about this. She just presumed that Kristin had gone out the night before, and that, you know, she had simply crashed with a friend somewhere. On Sunday, when Kristin still hadn't returned to their room, that's when Crystal. That's when Crystal started to get a little bit worried. So she started asking around the dorm to see if anyone knew of her whereabouts. It was at this point that Miranda said she had last seen her when she was dropped off for the frat party on Friday night. So together, they went and contacted the campus police, and they tried to report Kristin missing. But the Cal Poly police initially thought that Kristin may have just gone out of town for the weekend, because it was a long weekend and so many other students had done so. So they just thought, okay, well, she's probably just gone out of town. We're not going to start a missing persons report for her until Monday, till tomorrow, if she doesn't come back, if she doesn't return in time for classes, sort of thing. Because being a long weekend, there wouldn't be classes until Tuesday. On Monday, the Cal Poly police contacted Kristin's parents and advised that she was missing from the residence. They told the police, the parents told the police that they didn't receive their usual Sunday night call from Kristin, but that it hadn't raised any alarms because she had called on Friday. And they just figured with the long weekend and with her living on campus, she was probably busy, and they didn't, think it was worrisome when they didn't hear from her as they normally did on Sunday night. They were actually figuring maybe she would have called on Monday night instead. So the campus police believed it was possible that she went out of town. And an official missing persons file was not actually opened until Tuesday, May 28th. And the official interviews to put a timeline of Kristin's last known whereabouts over the weekend weren't even started until then. So this gal's been missing for essentially 3 days at this point, because she went missing in the wee hours of the morning of the 25th, and they didn't start their official report and start doing interviews trying to get a timeline of who last saw her until the 28th, which was Tuesday. So, in an unrelated incident, the day before that, May the 27th, which would have been the Monday, the local San Luis Obispo police, they attended the residence of Ruben Flores. So this is Paul Flores's father. They were there for a completely unrelated matter. They were looking for Paul. Ruben said that Paul wasn't at home at the time, and basically the police just said they needed him to attend the station in relation to an outstanding warrant he had for a DUI, which is a driving under the influence charge. So Paul did show up at the police station, and he was booked for that outstanding warrant. And he was photographed at that time for the booking. And he was photographed having a black eye. Now, nobody seems to remember Paul Flores having the black eye when he was at the party on Friday night / Saturday morning. However, the police that are booking him for this warrant are not the same police force that is dealing with the missing persons file for Kristin. Okay? So the missing persons file is being dealt with by the campus police, the Cal Poly police at this point. And this warrant for the DUI is being dealt with by the San Luis Obispo Police Department. So he said that he got the black eye playing basketball on Sunday. So the police didn't really give it another thought. So on May the 30th, which would have been 3 days after San Luis Obispo were looking for Paul, on May the 30th, the Cal Poly police brought Paul in to question him in relation to Kristin's disappearance. He told a very similar story about seeing Kristin at the party on Friday night. He said that he had walked home with Tom and Cheryl and Kristin, and that he had indeed walked Kristin to her dorm entrance. But he said that was the last he saw of her. He was adamant that he walked her to the entrance. She went up the steps. She went up to the entrance door, and she was going inside. He left, turned the corner, went into his own residence, never saw her after. So the Cal Poly police also noticed the remnants of this black eye that he has, as well as some scratches on his hands. Again, he's still claiming that they're injuries he got during a basketball game on Monday, although he previously told the San Luis Obispo police that he got the injury on Sunday. So already he's mixing up his timeline there a little bit. In a later police interview, he actually changed his account again, saying that he got the black eye. It wasn't from basketball. He got the black eye when he struck his face on the dashboard of his car as he was trying to remove his car stereo. So some things are already not adding up with Paul Flores's accounts of what happened on that weekend. So it was 11 days after Kristin's disappearance before the campus police, the Cal Poly police, collected belongings from Kristin's dorm. They then searched Paul Flores's dorm room on June 10th, which was a full 16 days post-disappearance. By this time, Paul had already cleared out his room for the summer, had moved out, and the janitorial staff from the university had already gone in and cleaned the dorms. Okay, I have to tie off that thread. I've got another thread put in here. We're ready to pick up where we left off. So Paul's already cleared out of his room for the summer and the janitorial staff have already cleaned the dorms. So if there was any hopes in finding any evidence or any clues that could have led them to whether or not he was involved in Kristin's disappearance, that had drastically diminished, right? The hopes of finding anything like that. So the investigation seemed to have stalled and there weren't any further leads at this point. And time was passing. And anybody who has ever dealt with a missing persons case knows that time is of the essence, right? So on June the 26th, 1996, the case was finally handed over from the Cal Poly police to the local police department for San Luis Obispo. This is a full month after the last time Kristin was seen alive. That police department decided to undertake a search of the entire dorm areas, like all of the dormitory areas of the Cal Poly campus. So they come in to do a search of the campus and they bring scent and cadaver dogs. So everyone's kind of familiar with scent dogs, right? Dogs that can look for the scent of a missing person. They can search out or smell certain types of drugs. Some dogs are bomb disposal dogs that are, are trained in looking for the scent of items, electronics, explosives. Cadaver dogs are a little bit different. Again, there's specific training for that. But a cadaver dog actually searches for the scent of decomposing human remains. Pretty morbid, but that's what they're trained to do specifically. So the police department brings in these dogs. They undertake a search of all of the dorms on campus. They brought in independent dog handlers, and the handlers weren't given any real information as to what specifically the police were searching for. They cleared two full dorm buildings, and then when they went inside the dorm building where Paul had been staying, a golden retriever, a border collie, as well as a second border collie, so all three dogs, all alerted outside the entrance to Paul's dorm room. So they let each dog in turn into the room. And each one of them alerted at the corner, one specific corner of the bed mattress in Paul's room. And I think one of them also alerted to a wastebasket that was in the dorm room. So after that search was completed, the police went in and removed the mattress from the room. And they brought in a fourth dog. This one was a boxer, again, with another independent handler. So the dog and the handler went through the dorm. And again, this dog stopped outside of Paul Flores' dorm room. When they let the dog inside, the dog alerted at the same corner of the bed where the mattress had previously been. And again, he alerted at that wastebasket. Time for a little coffee. So, with no luck locating Kristin, all the police knew at this point was that she had certainly met with foul play. They didn't think this was as simple as just a missing person, especially since they had cadaver dogs that alerted on that specific scent that they're looking for. So, also, her purse, Kristin's purse, her banking information, and all of her belongings had been left behind. So there was very little evidence to suggest that she had simply run off. Paul Flores was now the primary suspect in Kristin's disappearance, but there wasn't enough evidence to, press charges of any sort. So in July the 22nd, so now we're a couple of months past her disappearance point. July 22nd, the police undertook a search of Ruben Flores' residence, where Paul lived at times. During the search, they found 3 news articles about Kristin's disappearance, all from the Tribune News. Now, this wouldn't necessarily have been considered odd, but where they were located was odd. They found one copy of the news article under Ruben Flores' mattress. They found a copy under Paul Flores' mattress, and they found a third copy in the kitchen. So Paul's mother, Susan Flores, she's called Sue in some places and Susan in others. So his mother, she was actually living at an alternate address at the time of that search, but the police didn't know this. So the property where she was renting, that wasn't searched. Just the main house, like Ruben Flores' house, was searched at this point. In August of 96, Sue moved out of the rental property, and a young couple by the surname Lassiter, I believe that was their surname, they moved in. So they rented the property from Sue. So this was an extra house that Sue owned. She lived in it for a while. She's now moved out and rented it out to a couple. And they moved in. One day while the lady was out in the yard, I don't know, I guess I'll call her Mrs. Lassiter. I don't know her actual first name. One day while she was out in the yard, she found an earring in the crack of the concrete near the edge of the driveway by where the garbage bins were kept. And the earring had some sort of dried, dark substance on the back of it. Now, Mrs. Lassiter described it as being similar to a dried smear of blood. Whether or not it was, don't know. But she did contact the police when she discovered that the property they were renting was actually owned by the Floreses, and that Paul had been questioned in relation to this disappearance of Kristin. So they turned over the earring to the police. So this was in August of 96. So 3 months now after Kristin had disappeared. So by the time November rolled around, so now we're months after her disappearance, police believe that she met with foul play, that she's deceased, although they have no proof of that because there's been no remains located. In November of 96, the Smarts were still without Kristin, but as there were no charges laid in the case, and yet they were convinced of Kristin's death, they got a lawyer. I guess they already had a lawyer, but they met with their lawyer. And on November the 26th of 1996, they went ahead and filed a wrongful death suit against the Floreses. They felt that Paul was involved in the disappearance and that his parents were covering up for him. So they go through Christmas without Kristin. And in January of 97, 2 months after the wrongful death suit is launched, depositions for the suit begin. And during the depositions, the couple that had been renting Sue Flores' house, the Lassiters, they were deposed. And it was during their deposition that the earring found at their rental property was mentioned. And this was the first time that Mr. and Mrs. Smart or their attorney had heard about this earring. So the Smarts, through their attorney, submitted a request to review the earring so they could try and identify it to see if it was indeed, an earring belonging to Kristin. Unfortunately, after they submitted that request, the police told them that there was actually no official record of the earring. It seemed to have been misplaced. They could not locate it. And it had never been cataloged or entered into evidence for the case. So that was certainly an unfortunate bit of news. So further to this incident with the earring, the Lassiters also recalled that they used to have, I guess it was an odd noise that they would hear for a period of time. It didn't go on the entire time that they were living there, but for a while after they moved in, every night or early in the morning at 4:20 a.m., they would hear this continuous beeping noise for a period of time. So at 4:20 every day, this beeping noise would happen. Almost like a watch alarm, like a digital watch alarm. But they could never locate the source of where it was coming from. Like they didn't find any watch or anything like that. It did sound like it was coming from outside in the yard, in the area just underneath like the bedroom window. But there was a large planter out there, like a concrete, long, large concrete flower box. So people began to wonder, eerily enough, if it was actually Kristin's watch. Now, you might think a 4:20 a.m. alarm would be pretty odd for a teenager to have. And you'd be right for the most part. However, Kristin, who had been involved with swimming her entire life, she was associated with the swim team at the university. And she would get up really early on swim days to train at the pool before classes. So she was known to set an alarm really early in the morning for that purpose. So anyway, after the depositions were done, the Lassiters were evicted. And after getting their eviction notice, they decided that while they were still tenants, they would allow a search of the property, as it wasn't looked at during the previous police investigation, like the search of Ruben Flores' home, because the police didn't know that Sue was living at this other house. And it's a lot of legwork to request a search warrant. So unless someone's going to give you permission to go in and search a property, you can't just willy-nilly show up at someone's door and say, "Hi, we're the police, we're coming to search your yard." It doesn't work like that. So the Lassiters decided while they were still tenants there, they would allow the police to come in of their own free will, come in, search the yard. You know, you can't do damage, obviously, to anything because we're renting here, but feel free to come in and do a cursory search. I have finished stitching this section here, and I just tied off my thread, and I've now started a new thread up here. And it looks like I might have skipped a stitch right there. I think I did. I'm gonna have to fill that in now in a second when I get down to it. Okay, so the Lassiters decide that they're gonna let the police search the home. So March 3rd of 1997, the San Luis Obispo police searched the property with dogs. And although nothing conclusive was found, the cadaver dog they had with them did show an interest in the corner of the property of the backyard near where the earring had been located. In April of 1997, the Lassiters move out, and Sue Flores moves back into the property rather than re-rent it to new tenants. So she moves back in there. So nothing further happens with the wrongful death suit until November of 97. So this is a year, more than a year after Kristin has disappeared. And it's a year from when the wrongful death suit was first started. So in November of 97, Paul Flores is finally deposed. He goes in, supposedly to answer questions and put on record what his knowledge is of Kristin's whereabouts, the last time he saw her, so on and so forth. So he does show up at the deposition. He does attend, but he pled the Fifth Amendment, which you can do in the United States. He pled the Fifth Amendment on every single question that was asked of him, reading from a prepared script verbatim every single time for every question he was asked. He just repeated the exact same phrase, word for word, every single time. So there's no other significant developments in the case at all, that year. In 1998, no significant developments. August of 98, Governor Pete Wilson signs the Kristin Smart Safety Act. And that is an act that requires campus police at all public colleges and universities to involve local police immediately at the start of any serious crime investigation. Whether it's a serious crime or a missing persons report. If a serious crime takes place involving a student or there's a missing persons report filed on a campus, the campus police have to immediately involve their local police department. Also in 1998, 2 more females go missing. Okay? And the public begins to speculate if their disappearances could be related to Kristin. A gal by the name of Rachel Newhouse, she left a restaurant on November 13th and went missing. And within a day, clues were found, as well as a blood trail near a bridge. Then, Andrea Crawford also goes missing within the same vicinity. And a male suspect, Rex, his name is Rex Allen Krebs, was located and actually confessed to both of those abductions. And the bodies of both victims were located. But there was nothing tying him to Kristin's case. And the police determined that he was actually in prison for a prior rape at the time that Kristin disappeared. So they proved that, he couldn't be responsible for Kristin's disappearance, and that the crimes of these other 2 missing ladies are not, in fact, related. And that leaves Paul Flores back still as the prime suspect in the case. So, in early 1999, the FBI get involved. And they start independently interviewing Cal Poly students. And based on an anonymous tip from this time, they comb the campus grounds and they even sift dirt looking for clues. Now, this is 3 years after her disappearance. In the beginning of 2000, the police review the information. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So they sift dirt looking for clues. So now the investigation's got 3 separate law enforcement agencies, okay, working on it or have worked on it. The Cal Poly Police, the San Luis Obispo Police, and the FBI. Yet they don't seem any closer to solving the case at all. And the Smarts are still grieving, for their daughter with absolutely no answers as to what could have happened to her. So then in the beginning of 2000, the police review the information gathered throughout the investigation over the last 4 years. They decide they have enough to request another search warrant. In requesting the warrant, they use the statement, okay, and this is a quote, "Reasonable cause exists to believe that Kristin Smart's body is buried in the backyard of Susan Flores's home," unquote. So the home that they're referring to is that rental property that the Lasseters were evicted from and that Susan Flores moved back into, and that the cadaver dog found an interest, I guess, in a back, corner of the yard in the vicinity where this earring had been found. So the search warrant was granted. And on June 19th of 2000, so we're 4 years past Kristin's disappearance now, June 19th of 2000, the search was carried out. The search team spent 9 hours on her property, looking for the remains of Kristin or any personal belongings of hers. The neighbors apparently disclosed to the police that they saw Paul and his father, Reuben, doing grounds work at that property not long after Kristin had disappeared. New lattice work had been erected, along with the new concrete planter boxes, one of which was a 6x3 planter box that was actually built on top of a second layer of cement at the rear of the house, the same area where the Lasseters reported hearing a watch alarm every night for a while. After the search, the case seems to slow down again. There are no big leads, and the 5th anniversary of Kristin's disappearance passes. In 2001, a guy by the name of Dennis Mann, he gets involved in the case by setting up a website called Son of Susan. Dennis is a little bit of a web sleuth, and the site is set up with the sole intention of gathering information from the public and posting photos related to Kristin's disappearance and the fact that Paul Flores is the prime suspect. Dennis is very invested in the theory that Paul Flores is the perpetrator of the crime and that he is the sole reason for Kristin's disappearance. So what's going on with Paul Flores in, these subsequent years to Kristin's disappearance? Well, Paul is less than a stellar individual. So for a few minutes, we're going to take a little bit of a break from the timeline of Kristin's investigation, and we're going to take a look at Paul's background, both prior to her disappearance and in the years following her disappearance. So Paul has an extensive history of questionable behavior, I guess you could call it, towards women. All the way back in high school, there was an incident where he became infatuated with a female co-worker. I believe they were working at a local fast food joint or something, or a local restaurant. I can't remember exactly, but he became infatuated with this co-worker, and he started following her on a somewhat regular basis. He would show up at random areas where she was, and at one point, he followed her home from work when her home was located in a secluded area that he would have had no reason for traveling in the same direction as her. In December of 95, which is 5 months prior to Kristin's disappearance, a female student on the Cal Poly campus called police to report that an unknown male had climbed up onto the balcony of her residence and was peeping through the window of her room. So the campus police attended, and who did they find? They find Paul Flores, very intoxicated, outside of her residence. In February of 96, Paul was pulled over for speeding, and the police discovered that he was also intoxicated, and he received a DUI and got his license suspended. And I think it was this DUI that he had an outstanding warrant for not showing up for something, that the police went to his father's home to try and get him to come into the police station on May 27th. Can't be positive of that, but anyway. So he gets this DUI, his license is suspended. Then in the following month, in March of 96, 3 females made reports to police on campus regarding creepy phone calls that they were getting at their apartment. And although they didn't know the identity of the caller, the girls suspected that it was Paul Flores, because it was him who was found outside their apartment, because it was the same apartment. He was calling the same apartment that he had climbed up on the balcony of back in December. So this guy's just acting weirder and weirder. I don't know if that's correct English. More and more weird, I guess. All right, I have to mark off my stitches there. Okay. So so this is the apartment that he supposedly ended up climbing up the balcony of in December. So now Paul's developing a reputation on campus now of, being a bit of a odd duck, so to speak. And he's also developing a little bit of a reputation for taking liberties with other female students. He would grab them inappropriately, forcibly kiss girls at parties, taking advantage of them while they were intoxicated. Several students acknowledged being aware of his behavior to the point that he developed a nickname, Chester the Molester. Now, I don't know where the name Chester came from. I think they just used it because it rhymed, but yeah, so he became known as that. One student that was interviewed from the party, that frat party that Kristin had attended, one student said that they had seen Paul flirting with Kristin at the party, but they didn't see Paul have any further contact with her, and didn't see him or Kristin leave the party. So Paul's behavior towards women seems to have escalated over the years. Going from just being creepy and following people around to actually acting out. As a matter of fact, later in 2007, so we're talking, more than a decade after Kristin's disappearance, in 2007, Paul was the subject of a sexual assault investigation, and his DNA matched the DNA profile collected from a female victim. But the case was never prosecuted. I don't know why that case wasn't prosecuted. I don't know if the female victim decided not to go ahead with pressing charges. I couldn't find that information out. But I know he wasn't actually prosecuted for it, even though his DNA matched. In that incident, a female victim said that she had blacked out at a Redondo Beach bar and later woke up naked and disoriented in a stranger's bed. And that stranger was Paul Flores. So all of this behavior of Paul's has just escalated over the years. And he's been in trouble with the police several times for different DUIs, getting in trouble, with his actions towards females, that sort of thing. So let's go back to Kristin's case. By May of 2002, Kristin was declared legally deceased. And there was still no major break in her case. Paul still remained the primary suspect, but he still remained free. And then a little twist occurs in August of 2005. Okay, which is 9 years after Kristin's disappearance. In August of 2005, Sue Flores and her boyfriend filed a civil lawsuit, against Stan and Denise Smart, which I think that's just, bold as brass. Like, what the hell? Anyway, they file a civil lawsuit against the Smarts, claiming that Dennis Mann, the fellow who set up that website, Son of Sue, they claim in the lawsuit that Dennis Mann is actually working for the Smarts and that his involvement is causing ongoing harassment and emotional distress on the Flores family. Now, unfortunately for Sue Flores, her bringing this lawsuit also now opens up an opportunity for the Flores' property to be searched again, because it can be searched in relation to this lawsuit. Like, this is just getting out of hand at this point. I don't even know. Okay, I'm gonna finish off this thread, and I'm gonna start another piece of floss here, and we'll continue.